Foundations of consciousness. Have you ever paused and felt the hush between two thoughts? That split second where nothing moves yet, everything exists. That space is not empty, it is a portal. And what lies beyond it is far older than the ticking of your clock or the pulsing thrum of your heartbeat. It is something vast, patient and watching. It is consciousness. But what is consciousness? Truly, science tells us it is the result of synaptic firings, a byproduct of neural activity, a candle flickering inside the skull. But the mystics whisper a different tale. They speak of a silent witness that stands untouched by birth or decay, a luminous presence that does not sleep, even when the body folds into slumber. Consciousness, they say, is not what the mind produces, it is what the mind is suspended in. It is not something you have, it is what you are. And yet we often confuse this eternal awareness with the restless chatter of the mind. The mind speaks in riddles and fragments. It recalls yesterday and fears tomorrow. It identifies with the name, the role, the face in the mirror. But there is something behind the mind watching its tantrums and desires with a gaze that does not flinch. This silent presence has been there since your first breath, and it will remain long after your final exhale. It is not bound by the script of your life. It observes, it remembers, it waits. It is the silent core you forgot was always there. What then is the soul? If consciousness is the ocean, the soul is a wave that rises from it, dances in its own form, and ultimately falls back into stillness. The soul is the traveler and the record keeper. It is the invisible thread that weaves through lifetimes, carrying the scent of forgotten temples and the echoes of old vows. Every moment of insight, every sudden shiver of recognition when you meet someone new or walk into an ancient place you have never seen before may be the soul whispering through the veil. The soul is the bridge between the human self and the divine unknown. It is not confined by language or memory. It knows without thinking and moves without effort. It is the part of you that is always on a journey, even while you believe you are standing still. In psychology, the self with a capital S is a concept explored most deeply by Carl Jung. The self is not the ego, not the persona you wear at work or at dinner tables. The self is the totality of who you are, including your shadow and your unconscious patterns, your dreams and fears, and archetypal inheritance. The self is the divine blueprint buried beneath conditioning. The ego fears change. The self invites transformation. And it is through the expansion of consciousness that we move closer to that self. This is not a journey of information. It is a pilgrimage into the architecture of our being. Across traditions and time, this movement of the soul has been mapped in metaphors and myths. The ancients told of heroes who left the known world, descended into darkness, met monsters and mentors, and returned with treasures. This is no mere fable. It is the language of the soul's passage. Joseph Campbell called it the hero's journey, but its structure predates him by thousands of years. In the East, it finds form in the chakra system, where energy ascends through centers of consciousness, from survival to divine union. In Egypt, it was the weighing of the heart. In Kabbalah, the soul climbs the tree of life. Each system offers a language, but the destination is the same. Plato described the world as shadows flickering on a cave wall, illusions mistaken for reality. The awakening of consciousness, he claimed, is like a prisoner turning toward the light and stumbling out of the cave into the sun. What the eyes see is not the end of vision. There is something behind the appearance of things, a force, a truth, a presence. Consciousness is not just awareness of things, it is awareness of awareness itself. It is the doorway through which the soul perceives, grows, and remembers what it truly is. But why does consciousness evolve? What draws it forward? Why does the soul not rest in the first light it finds? Perhaps it is because it remembers a light more ancient than the stars. Perhaps the soul is not gathering knowledge, but shedding forgetfulness. The journey is not about becoming more, but becoming what you already are beneath the masks. As we move through the 7 levels of consciousness, we will discover that each stage strips away another illusion, another prison of identity, another veil between the self we pretend to be and the essence that always was. This path is not linear. It coils like a serpent, spirals like galaxies. You may ascend and fall 100 times in a single season, but each descent carries a hidden grace. Every fall is an invitation to rise with deeper roots. This is not a ladder, but a spiral. The further you go, the closer you return to the center. And the center is not new. It is what you forgot when you first became a name and a face and a story. The journey begins not on a mountain or in a temple, but in the still place behind your thoughts. It begins with a whisper that says, "You are not just this, you were never only this." And now the path opens. In the chapters to come, we will descend through the echoes of fear and rise into the arms of timeless light. Each level of consciousness reveals a hidden key. Some will unlock ancient doors, others will dissolve the walls themselves, but all will ask you to remember who you were before you were told who to be. This is not just information, it is initiation. If you are ready, then walk with care. The soul has already begun to stir. The 7 levels of consciousness. Not all thresholds are crossed with footsteps. Some are crossed in silence while staring into the dark. Others are crossed mid-breath when the old self dissolves like mist beneath the sun. The path into expanded consciousness is not paved, it reveals itself step by step as if sensing your readiness. Each level is not merely a stage of awareness, it is a mirror. And each mirror shows you not just who you are, but what still binds you. These 7 levels are not invented categories. They are ancient patterns mapped by mystics, psychologists, and seers alike. They are the staircases of the soul, spiraling through terror and longing into something vast and unnameable. The levels are not rules, they are echoes. If one echoes inside you now, it is because your soul already remembers its shape. The first level is the survival state. It is the cave in which the soul first awakens to the terror of existence. Here, the world is a predator, and you are prey. Everything is filtered through the lens of survival. Where is safety? Where is danger? What must I do to continue breathing? There is no trust here, only reflex, only fear. In this place, the body clenches and the breath is shallow. The heart does not hope. It listens for threats. The ego has not yet formed its complex web of stories. It is raw, primitive. It clings to what is known, even if the known is pain. Psychologically, this level is ruled by the lower instincts, the primal drives of hunger, shelter, and control. In Freudian terms, it is the id unrestrained. In the chakra system, it is the root, the base of the spine where the life force first coils in tension. The mystics might call this Egypt, the land of bondage where the soul toils without knowing why. Many never leave this stage. They wear masks of adulthood and success, but beneath the surface they remain in survival mode, lashing out at imagined threats or folding in terror at the idea of loss. To evolve from here is not a decision. It is a trembling crack in the cocoon. It is the moment the fear becomes unbearable. And from that agony comes the flicker of curiosity. Could there be more than this? The second level is the dominion of the ego. Here the self forms like a child, discovering its reflection for the first time. I am, I have, I want. This is the realm of identity, of power, of control. The ego rises like a fortress. It builds names, titles, and roles to hide its fragility. It fears humiliation more than death. Here, the focus shifts from survival to domination. Not just how do I live, but how do I win? How do I stand taller than others? The soul wears a crown but forgets it is made of paper. Psychology calls this the ego complex, a necessary but treacherous invention. In Jungian thought, it is the mask that forgets it is a mask. In mysticism, this is the struggle of the solar force, the will attempting to shape reality by force rather than alignment. In the Kabbalistic tree, this echoes the sphere of Gevura, judgment without compassion. At this level, many become addicted to their own reflection. The feedback loop of approval and applause becomes nourishment. But it is a hunger that never ends. The trap here is subtle. You believe you are rising, but you are only fortifying the prison. The way forward is not in conquering more, but in recognizing the emperor has no clothes. You must taste the hollowness of your victories to sense the next opening. The third level is the consciousness of conformity. It is the great lullaby of the tribe. Here the soul no longer seeks just to survive or to dominate. It longs to belong. It whispers, "What must I be to be loved? What parts of myself must I bury to be accepted?" The rules of the group become sacred. To question them feels like death. The tribe can be a family, a nation, a religion, or an ideology. Anything that offers identity in exchange for obedience. In psychological terms, this is the social self shaped by attachment theory and conditioned rewards. In mysticism, this is the early stage of the heart center, the yearning for connection misdirected into imitation. This is where you smile when your soul weeps. This is where you shrink your truth to fit into someone else's frame. Many live their whole lives in this level, fearing exile more than falseness. Here the soul wears the face that pleases others, but the eyes betray it. They always do. The shift comes not in rebellion, but in heartbreak. When belonging demands too high a price, when the tribe cannot hold the truth of who you are, the soul begins to ache. And that ache is a doorway. The fourth level is the awakening of the inner witness. The light behind the mask begins to flicker. Here, the soul turns inward and begins to ask dangerous questions. Who am I without the story? What if everything I've believed has been a spell? The external world loses its grip. Success, power, status become ghostly. This stage is marked by inner turbulence. The ego resists. The tribe recoils. Friends drift away. Everything that once defined you begins to fall apart. This is the dark night of the soul. It is not romantic. It is not graceful. It is the hollowing of everything false. Psychologically, this is the process of individuation, the breaking apart of the false self, so the deeper self can emerge. In mysticism, this is the moment the soul walks into the desert. In the chakra system, it is the full opening of the heart, not as sentiment, but as sacred fire. Here you meet your shadow. You realize you have projected your darkness onto the world. And in reclaiming it, you reclaim your power. But the pain can be immense. This is the stage where many retreat. They run back into conformity or ego because the silence feels unbearable. But those who stay, who let themselves dissolve, begin to feel something miraculous. The soul does not die in this fire. It is forged. The fifth level is creative manifestation. Here, the soul rises from the ashes with a new rhythm. It no longer obeys the mind. It follows the call. Purpose begins to pulse through every action. You no longer ask, "What do I want?" but "What wants to move through me?" Here the voice is no longer an instrument of control, but of expression. In psychological terms, this is the flow state. the integration of discipline and freedom. In mystical systems, this is the activation of the throat center, the logos, the sacred word that speaks the world into being. The soul becomes a bridge. Your actions serve something larger. Your pain is transformed into medicine. There is less striving, more allowing, but the ego is not fully dead. It lurks, waiting to reassert control. The test here is not whether you can shine, but whether you can shine without needing applause. Can you serve without identity? Can you create without attachment? The soul at this level begins to align with synchronicity. Life becomes a dialogue. You speak and the universe answers. You act and doors open. But this too is a passage. The self still moves. And ahead is a deeper seeing. The sixth level is visionary consciousness. It is not just about action, but about perception. Here the soul sees patterns in chaos. It reads the symbols beneath events. The veil is thin. Intuition sharpens. You begin to dream with your eyes open. At this level you see beyond people's words into their essence. You recognize pain dressed as anger. You feel the web that connects everything. Psychology cannot fully capture this level, though archetypal psychology hints at it. In mysticism, this is the third eye, the place of vision beyond time. In Kabbalah, this is the realm of Binah understanding, the feminine wisdom that holds the whole without judgment. Here you are, no longer surprised by synchronicity. You live in it. Reality bends, time dissolves. But this level has its temptations. Vision can lead to delusion. The ego can sneak in disguised as prophecy. The task here is to remain anchored, to live with vision without becoming a mystic addict, to hold your knowing in humility. The soul here becomes luminous. It walks softly, speaks rarely, but when it speaks, the world listens. The seventh level is unity consciousness. It is the dissolution of all boundaries. There is no self and other, no seeker and sought. There is only the one. This is not an idea. It is a state of being. The mystics describe it in riddles because words fail. The ocean swallows the wave. The candle becomes the sun. The soul merges with source. There is no fear, no desire, only presence. Psychologically, this is the realm beyond the map. Maslow called it self-transcendence. It is the end of the journey and the return to the beginning. In mysticism, this is the crown, the thousand-petaled lotus, the divine union. In Sufism, it is fana, the annihilation of self. Here, even the need for awakening disappears. You are. That is enough. But few remain here. The world pulls, the body aches, and so the soul often descends again, not as failure, but as compassion, to walk again among those still climbing, to light the path without speaking. This level is not the end, it is the source, and from it all things begin again. These 7 levels are not stairs to be climbed. They are tones in a symphony. You may play several at once. You may fall and rise in the same breath. What matters is not the order, but the honesty. Where are you now? What level echoes in your soul? What illusion are you ready to release? The map is not the journey, but if the map speaks, then the road has already begun to unfold. Navigating the journey. The soul does not walk a straight path. It spirals, it twists back upon itself like ancient rivers through unknown lands. What you thought was a destination may reveal itself as only a threshold. And what you thought you left behind may return in unfamiliar form, asking to be seen again. Consciousness is not a ladder where each rung is higher than the last. It is a wheel turning through birth, decay, and rebirth. You may dance at the edges of unity one day only to fall into the fears of survival the next. Do not be disheartened. This is not regression. This is the spiral nature of awakening. The soul revisits old rooms to see them with new eyes. What changes is not the house, but the one who walks its halls. There is a secret in this spiral. It is the presence of patterns, invisible thresholds that appear not by choice but by necessity. Certain events seem designed not just to wound, but to awaken. You lose a job and discover your identity was built around it. You end a relationship and find your voice again. These moments are not random, they are catalysts. The soul arranges them with exquisite precision. Sometimes it whispers, other times it shouts. But always it invites. It invites you to step beyond the known, to peel away another layer, to cross another veil. The most powerful catalysts are often the ones that feel like endings. They are the cracks through which the light insists on entering. Not all who encounter the catalyst step through the door. Many retreat, and this too is part of the dance. The soul does not force its growth. It waits, it watches, and when the ground is ready, it sends the invitation again. The invitations come in many forms. They may appear as sudden insights during quiet moments, synchronicities that make your heart pause, or a sense of deep unease in places that once felt comfortable. Sometimes it is a dream that will not leave you. A sentence spoken by a stranger that echoes for days. The rational mind will dismiss these things, but the soul knows. It listens to different winds. To navigate this journey is not to strive, but to listen, not to conquer, but to surrender. There are practices that help, but none that guarantee arrival. Still, the path is not without guidance. Silence is one of the oldest teachers. In stillness, the surface mind loses its grip and deeper truths emerge. Shadow work is another. To bring light to the hidden wounds, to speak to the parts of yourself that were silenced, shamed, or forgotten. There is power in solitude, not as escape, but as sacred encounter. And there is wisdom in sacred texts, not as dogma, but as mirrors. The Bhagavad Gita, the Tao Te Ching, the writings of mystics like Rumi and Eckhart, these are not instructions. They are invitations. Yet even as you walk the path with reverence, beware of the illusions that gather along the way. The path of consciousness is littered with traps, and the higher you climb, the more subtle they become. One of the first is spiritual bypassing, the desire to use lofty truths to avoid deep pain. You may say everything is one to avoid feeling grief. You may speak of love while burying anger. This is not awakening, it is avoidance wearing sacred robes. And the soul does not transcend wounds by ignoring them. It descends into them with open eyes and open hands. Another trap is ego inflation. As you awaken gifts or insights, there is a temptation to see yourself as above others, to wear your vision like a crown. But remember, the higher the light, the subtler the shadow. The true mystic walks with humility. They do not speak of enlightenment, they embody it in silence. Knowledge itself can become a trap, reading endlessly, gathering information, chasing the next idea. But the mind is clever. It can turn even wisdom into armor. You may know all the stages of the soul and still be a stranger to yourself. Embodiment matters more than intellect. Presence matters more than theory. Can you be still in the face of your own fear? Can you hold someone's pain without fixing it? Can you feel the divine in the mundane? These are better questions than how much you know. And yet, even with all the tools and all the care, there are times when the path darkens, when the voice of the soul falls silent. This too is part of the journey. The soul enters winter. It curls inward. This is not failure, it is gestation. Just as seeds lie beneath the earth before blooming, so too must the soul rest before rising. The danger is in judging the silence, in trying to force clarity when what is needed is surrender. The seasons of the soul cannot be rushed. They are older than your desires. In these moments, grace becomes your only compass. Grace is not earned. It is not deserved. It is given. Often it appears in unexpected ways. A moment of stillness after tears. A stranger's kindness when you are at your lowest. A sudden lightness that descends without explanation. Grace is the quiet hand that holds you when you forget how to walk. It does not speak loudly, but it never leaves. It reminds you that you are not alone, that something vast and benevolent moves with you, even when you stumble. Grace is not a shortcut. It is the breath of the divine reminding the soul of its origin. So how does one walk this journey, not with answers, but with questions, not with certainty, but with wonder? The soul is not a project to be completed, it is a mystery to be lived. Comparison is futile. Each path is sacred, each fall is meaningful, each ascent is a remembrance. You may be in level 1 and carry the light of level 7. You may be in level 6 and still wrestle with the ghosts of level 2. It does not matter. What matters is honesty. Are you listening to your soul or your story? Are you choosing from love or from fear? Are you moving toward expansion or contraction? This journey is not just about becoming more conscious. It is about becoming more whole, about reclaiming the parts you abandoned, about loving the self you once judged, about remembering the divine spark within the ordinary. It is not easy, it is not fast, but it is sacred and it is yours. Conclusion. There comes a moment when the seeking itself grows quiet. Not because the soul has found every answer, but because it no longer needs them. The questions remain, but they no longer sting. The journey continues, but it no longer burns. Something deeper has awakened, something that does not shout. It watches, it smiles, it breathes. You begin to realize that all the stages, all the levels, all the movements were never about reaching a destination. They were about peeling back the veils you mistook for skin. They were about remembering what was never lost. The soul is not a traveler finding something new. It is a flame uncovering its own light. You may have thought that awakening meant arrival, but what if it means intimacy with the moment, with the breath, with the silence between thoughts, with the ache in your chest, with the eyes of a stranger, with the echo of something ancient in the rustling trees? To be conscious is not to escape the world. It is to finally see it. To feel the sacredness in the mundane, the divine in the broken, the infinite in the now. When you realize that you stop chasing the next level, you begin living the one you're in, fully, honestly, reverently. There is no final level where the soul sits crowned in starlight, untouched by pain or confusion. Even those who burn with the fire of unity still wake to aching bodies and restless dreams. They still forget. They still stumble. The difference is not in their perfection. It is in their return. They return more quickly, more gently, more completely. They return without judgment. They do not seek to escape the human. They seek to embody the divine through it. You begin to understand that this journey was never about abandoning the world. It was about loving it with new eyes. And so you find yourself here, not at the end, but at a beginning. A different kind of beginning. Not the beginning of a quest, but the beginning of a remembering. The remembering of the still point within. The quiet flame that never flickered. The presence that was with you in your laughter and your grief. In your triumph and your collapse, it was always there, waiting, not to be found, but to be noticed, to be welcomed. What happens now is not for books or teachings to decide. What happens now is a matter of presence, of choice. Will you live awake? Will you walk each moment as though it were a page from a sacred book? Will you speak as if your words are spells that shape the invisible? Will you treat your wounds not as flaws but as doors? Will you remember not in thought but in being that you are not separate from the divine but its expression? There is no map beyond this point. No steps, no charts. Only awareness, only presence, only the eternal now unfolding breath by breath. The soul does not need more instructions. It needs your trust. Not blind trust, but living trust. The kind that grows with every moment you choose truth over comfort, stillness over noise, wholeness over image. Let others speak of progress. You will speak of presence. Let others chase awakening. You will live it quietly, deeply, fully. In your gaze, in your touch, in your silence, you are not the seeker. You are the light it sought. And now, with no more need to chase you, begin to glow from within. The soul beyond time. Even as the journey appears to end, something deeper begins to stir. A gentle whisper echoes through the stillness, saying, there is more, not in the way the mind expects, but in the way the soul remembers. You have walked through the levels, unwrapped illusions, stood naked before the silence, touched the edge of the eternal, and now something ancient begins to rise from within. It is not a memory, it is older than memory. It is the knowing without words, the being before form. The soul does not live in time, it only passes through it like light through stained glass, taking on colors for a moment before returning to its source. You begin to sense this truth in subtle ways. The face of a child feels familiar, not because you've met, but because you've known. A scent carried on the wind opens a forgotten door in your chest. A place you have never seen in this life stirs longing in your bones. These are not dreams. They are fractures in the illusion. They are glimmers of the timeless self peeking through the folds of the temporal body. And you begin to realize your soul has never been bound by chronology. The past is not behind you. The future is not ahead. All things are here. Now, waiting to be touched with awareness. When you sit in deep stillness, something begins to dissolve. The stories lose urgency. The fears loosen their grip. You feel yourself stretching inward, outward, downward into something bottomless. You remember that every lifetime, every face, every pain, and every joy has been a note in a larger song. And though the mind cannot recall the verses, the soul sings them in silence. There is no beginning. There is no final revelation. There is only deeper and deeper seeing. And what you see now is a truth too vast for language, that the soul is not evolving toward light. It is remembering it is made of light. You may feel the pull to share this knowing, but find that words fall short. That's because this truth is not meant to be explained. It is meant to be lived. When you walk into a room, people will feel it, even if they do not understand it. When you touch another with presence, it will awaken something in them they had forgotten. When you listen without agenda, you become a mirror in which others glimpse their forgotten face. You are not here to preach. You are here to radiate. You are not here to convince. You are here to remember. As this deep remembering continues, you will find the world remains the same, and yet nothing is the same. The sky does not change color, and yet it glows differently. The noise of life continues, and yet you hear the silence underneath it. You still feel sorrow, but now it carries sweetness. You still witness suffering, but now you see the hidden grace woven within it. The dualities remain, but you are no longer split by them. You have become the space in which opposites meet and dissolve. This is not a state you achieve. It is a presence you become. The soul beyond time does not shout, it hums. It vibrates gently through your gestures, your gaze, your breath. It does not need recognition. It needs only sincerity. To live from this place is not to escape life, but to pour into it something holy, not in grand gestures, but in quiet presence, the kind that turns an ordinary moment into a sacred doorway. The soul beyond time is not somewhere else. It is here, in you. It always has been. The return to the world. Eventually, the inward gaze begins to shift outward, not from loss, but from fullness. The soul does not linger in the infinite to escape the finite. It descends again, not as a prisoner, but as a bearer of light. You return not because you have forgotten, but because you remember. The sacred is not elsewhere. It is here beneath your feet, in the eyes that meet yours, in the silence between two breaths. You carry the vastness within you now, but the world remains hungry for presence, and so the soul returns not as a seeker but as a bridge. The return is not a reversal, it is a spiral. You carry with you the deep stillness, the silent awareness, the memory of unity. But now it flows through form, through daily rituals, through human interactions, through the rhythm of ordinary life. The soul no longer sees the sacred as separate from the mundane. Washing a dish can become a prayer. Listening to another's sorrow becomes communion. Walking down a familiar street becomes a meeting with the eternal. Nothing needs to change for everything to be seen anew. But the return is not without its challenge. You will find that language feels too small, that others may not understand, that the pace of the world grates against your inner stillness. There may be moments of loneliness, not because you are lost, but because you see more. But do not close, do not retreat. This is not a punishment, it is an initiation. The light you carry is meant to be shared, not by proclamation, but by embodiment. You do not need to speak of awakening, you only need to live it, gently, truthfully, in silence if necessary. As you move through the world, others will be drawn to something they cannot name. They may not know why they trust you or feel safe near you. It is not your personality they are drawn to. It is your presence. You have become a sanctuary not made of stone or belief, but of being. You no longer react from fear or speak to control. You listen from depth, you act from clarity, and your very being becomes a kind of silent blessing. You do not need to fix the world, you only need to love it as it is, and that love changes more than effort ever could. You may find new work calling to you or old work falling away. You may feel the need to simplify to create more space. You may lose things you once held dear and discover they were never truly yours. This shedding is natural. The soul no longer clings. It holds loosely with reverence. What stays, stays. What leaves, blesses as it departs. The return is not a life of withdrawal, it is a deeper participation. But now you act without attachment. You serve without identification. You create without needing applause. This is not indifference, it is freedom. The world may not reward this way of being. It may overlook it, misunderstand it, even resist it. But that does not matter. You are not here to be understood. You are here to be. And in your being, the world slowly begins to shift. Not in great waves, but in ripples. Quiet, unseen, yet unstoppable. Every moment you live from soul, every breath you take in awareness becomes a light in the fabric of existence. This is how transformation begins, not with noise but with presence, not with demand but with embodiment. The return is sacred. It is the final movement of the spiral and the beginning of another. You walk the same roads, but with different eyes. You meet the same faces, but with an open heart. You live the same life, but now it pulses with something vast and quiet. The world does not change, you do, and through you the world remembers itself. Living as the flame. There is a silence that no longer frightens you. It waits, not beyond the world, but within it. You have touched it, sat with it, become it, and now it walks with you into every moment. You do not need to retreat to temples or mountains to feel it. It moves with you through crowded streets, through forgotten corners, through ordinary days. It burns not with fire, but with stillness. You have become the flame, not a fire that consumes, but a light that reveals. Your presence no longer demands, it blesses. To live as the flame is not to shine constantly. Even stars rest behind clouds. It is to remain lit within, no matter the weather outside. You will still feel pain. You will still encounter sorrow, but now you meet them with open hands. You do not push them away. You do not define yourself by them. You sit with them. You breathe with them. And in doing so, you transform them. Your wounds become windows. Your scars become symbols. You carry them not as burdens, but as reminders. Each one says, I have passed through fire and emerged whole. You no longer fear the darkness. It no longer feels like a void, but a womb, a place of return, a place of beginning. You no longer chase meaning, you become it. Your life becomes less about doing and more about being. But this being is not passive, it is powerful. Your every movement carries intention. Your words carry resonance. Your gaze carries depth. You do not speak to impress, you speak to awaken. You do not act to prove, you act to align. And without trying, the world bends around your stillness. To live as the flame is to become the invitation. You do not call others to wake up with force. You do not teach with pride, you simply live, and in your living others begin to stir. They sense something, not through your words, but through your presence, your listening, your stillness. They feel safe not because you fix them, but because you do not need them to change. You hold space, you reflect, you remind them of what they have forgotten, that they too are light hidden beneath noise. The flame does not compare itself, it does not compete, it simply burns. Whether noticed or not, it continues. Whether praised or ignored, it glows. This is your life now. You do not need to perform. You do not need to chase. You do not need to explain. You rest within your own fire. You act when the soul stirs you. You speak when silence gives you the words. You create not from pressure, but from alignment. The flame moves you not with urgency, but with clarity. And still the spiral turns. The journey never ends. Not because you are lost, but because existence itself is unfolding. Ever deeper, ever wider. You do not arrive at truth. You become a vessel for it. You do not conquer time. You begin to pulse with its rhythm. Every breath becomes sacred. Every meeting becomes divine. Every loss becomes another door. You walk lightly now. Not because you are detached, but because you trust. You trust the fire within. You trust the path beneath. You trust the silence that holds it all. You have not become something new. You have remembered what you have always been. Not the roles, not the names, not the stories, but the flame beneath it all. You live now not to become, but to burn, quietly, steadily, eternally.